Greetings, curators. Welcome back to the ProxyBrewer. Today I hope to instruct you on how to place your custom emblem onto any STL file. We're going to start from an SVG file and turn it into a proper emblem or insignia, which we can then graft onto any surface. In the bottom right, you can see my key presses, so you can hopefully follow along, and I'll try to narrate my actions as best as possible. As you can see, with this method, I've placed emblems over several relatively complex surfaces and orientations. And the emblem deforms correctly. And I'll even show you a second method on how to have more control in the instance that the surface doesn't allow for smooth conforming, such as on this head. All right, let's start. Let me just make sure that the mat cap is set to material, object, and choose a nice one, a nice bright one. Okay, first we will go to File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics, and we will select our icon, our SVG. It's important that the SVG has no white background, so the SVG itself has to be black. But I'll make sure that there is a link in the description to a website which can remove the background from any SVG file. Now, what is important to note is that when you import the STL, it will spawn it at the world origin, which is, well, where all axes align, cross. But you can also find it here in the outliner in the top right, and it's going to import it as a curve. So what we want to do is let's just first scale it up a little bit with the mouse after pressing S, and then press X and 90 to scale it 90 degrees on the X-axis. And let's just bring it up here so we can easily follow along and scale it up a little bit. What you want to do is Ctrl-J, join this together, and then Ctrl-A, visual geometry to mesh. And that then set the origin to the center so that it's a little bit more centered and we can orient it correctly later. Now, once this is joined, let's go in to edit mode and select all, and then press X and choose limited dissolve, which will remove most of the dirty geometry faces. And then let's give it some depth by adding a solidify modifier. And I think, this is about the right amount of depth. You don't need much more than that to begin with, and we can always adjust it later. So we've done all that, imported the SVG, gave it depth. Let's apply the modifier with Ctrl-A, visual geometry to mesh. And in order to make sure that this deforms correctly, we need to remesh it. So let's duplicate this and bring it down, Shift D, and then press G and Z. Step 2 says we remesh it with the remesh modifier, which you can find here in the modifier tab. Remesh, select sharp, and let's do about 8. What it says, and make sure to uncheck remove disconnected. Now, when I zoom into this, there's still some artifacting here that I don't like, so let's just up the geometry a little bit. And now that looks about right to me. And let's visual geometry to mesh again to apply the modifier. Now, this may take a little bit, depending on how strong your machine is. And now we have a very high density mesh. Now this may even be a little too high density for this, 2 million polygons almost. So just to make sure that this remains within reasonable bounds, I'm going to decimate this. And it says it's got 900,000 face counts. Let's set it to like 0.2, see what it makes of that. Now this also may take a little bit as it tries to collapse the geometry into a smaller amount. Now 300,000, that's about okay with me. Let's visual geometry to mesh and then inspect how dense the mesh is by going into tab, edit mode. once this is done. Here we go. As you can see, face count is more reasonable now. And then we're going to step 3, which is create a lattice, which cuts through the middle of the emblem. So let's set the cursor to selected. Actually, let's just set origin to geometry again, and then cursor to selected. And let's then Shift A and create a lattice and scale that up to roughly envelop the emblem. There we go. Now, this emblem is a bit big. We wanted to flatten this out, so we can just take out the front face and make this a single dimension plane. But we do want to give it enough resolution so that it can bend properly, which we can do by going into the lattice and here in the properties tab and give it a certain amount of resolution. I think 14 and 10 looks about right to me. You can still adjust this later when necessary. And then we will parent this to the lattice by selecting the icon, then selecting the lattice, and then Control P, lattice to form, which will give it a lattice modifier, which means that when you move the lattice around, the emblem will come with it. At this point, we can already start shrink wrapping this to any object that we want. So for example, I wanted to put this on the front of this circle. I'm just going to shift right click to move the world origin, the cursor. Then I will select the lattice, set the selection to cursor with Shift S, and give the lattice the shrink wrap modifier, which will then, ta-da, wrap it to the object. And basically at this point we can start scaling this and putting this wherever we want on the circle or on this object. Now, what is important is that once you have done this method and the lattice is in place, you can't just simply move it everywhere on the sphere or object. As you can see, that would cause some weird angular deformations that we don't want. But if we do want to put it on any facing direction that we wish on this sphere or any other object, this is what you have to do. So let's go into edit mode, select the face upon the center of our emblem is going to be facing. We go select shift cursor selected with Shift S. We then go to view, align view to active, and top. As you can see, our camera is now aligned with that face that we just selected. So we can go out of edit mode, select the lattice, press Shift S, selection to cursor, which will put it upon the face that we just aligned our camera with. Then go to Object, Transform, Align to Transform Orientation, which will bring up this little dialog box in the bottom left, which we can then select the orientation view. And as you can see, the lattice is now aligned with our view. And if we then press X -90, there it is. We've got our emblem back in the correct orientation. And it's perfect where we want it to be, and we can still adjust this a little bit if you want to. We can scale it, we can make it smaller, we can scale it lengthwise, widthwise, we can do all sorts of stuff. And as you can see, we can do this on any object, even on objects upon which we don't know the orientation from, the rotation from. This is usually how an STL file will be imported with 0, 0, 0 rotation in the transform box. such as this STL file. So let's just go ahead and copy exactly what we did here with our new emblem. No, I'm a little bit stupid for not making a copy of this. I'm just going to do that really quickly. I'm just going to select the lattice in the emblem, Shift D, make sure that the lattice is no longer shrink wrapped. And then I'm going to reset the rotation in the top right. Got this, let's copy paste this with duplicate, Shift D, bring it to, okay, so let's put this emblem on the front of this helmet. Let's go into the model with edit mode, select whatever face we want it to be on. I think this is a fine face, it's almost in the middle. Cursor to selected, view, viewpoint, align view to active, top. We will go back into object mode, Shift S, selection to cursor, and then transform, align to transform orientation, and then set view. As you can see, it is now in position. Let's reset, and we can then scale this on the Z-axis. Rotate is on the Z-axis, and then on the Y-axis, scale this in, and then apply the shrink wrap modifier. Boom. And there it is. And we can still move this up and down. Of course, remember, we're still in the local transform orientation mode. Put it here, we can scale it up. As you can see, it is intersecting with the mesh, so this will print perfectly fine. We can even bring this out, and we can even scale the object itself if we wanted to, give more depth. But I think that's fine. So there you go. That's how you would place pretty much any insignia and any emblem onto your STL file. Now, if you wanted to prepare this for printing, what I would do is select everything, Ctrl A, visual geometry to mesh, Alt P, clear and keep transformation. We delete the lattice because we don't want that in our print. It's always good to double check the face orientation by going here in the viewport overlays. Make sure that nothing is red. All right, I'm fine with this. I would then Ctrl J, merge it all together, or at least join it all together. And from here, you can select the object, go to Export, STL, and save it where you want. Make sure that selection only is included. Give it a name, emblem on any surface STL is fine. Export. I'm just going to open 3D Builder at this point. And let's see, I can slide this over. New scene. I've got a little guy. His emblem is on the forehead. Import model. Now, as you can see, there is an issue with the objects that are invalidly defined. Click here to repair. We're going to click on that. It's going to start repairing. And we can then bring it into our slicer of choice, where we can then pre-support it and print it. As you can see, the emblem is on there. And yeah. Right, I almost forgot how I would do it with a little bit more of a complex geometry, like over here. Like, for example, if I were to shrink wrap this to the hat, that would most definitely go all wonky. So what I did instead is basically I would bring the object, once again, I will have to copy this. How do I do this? Here we go. Duplicate this. Make sure that the lattice is not shrink wrapped. Reset the rotation. So what I would do is bring this to our head, where we want to deform it in our custom way. Align it. And then instead of shrink wrapping it, we can actually just deform the lattice instead by clicking the simple deform lattice, going to bend, and then picking one of these axes. So as you can see, we can actually deform this in the way that we want manually. Now, of course, this is always going to be more of a dirty way to do it, and you do need to make sure that the emblem is intersecting with the mesh. We can even apply another simple deform on the x-axis, select bend to deform this in a different way. That looks more like an embossing or something that is actually part of the hat. And from this point, I would pretty much follow the same steps on repairing the mesh in 3D Builder. Now, this is always going to be a little bit more dirty, but this will still give you the control that you need to get the sort of designs that you want. Maybe this is a little bit too deformed on the x-axis. That's not necessary. Slide it back a little bit, make it a little bit more subtle. I would still be perfectly happy with this. Actually, it's not completely aligned, but yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will make sure to leave a link to the Discord where you can join and find this file under the free assets channel. I'm always there to answer any questions, and make sure to leave a comment, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. All right, see you.